I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal, the podcast for transformational leaders who are seeking modern change mastery. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works. And this is the first ever live episode of the show. It was part of the ACMP Change Conference in July, and it's a webinar with hundreds of people attending. So it has a little different energy and vibe from the usual episodes. Amongst other things, I'm not really jumping in to make editorial comments like I usually do, because it's really all happening live and in the moment. But this is, as always, I hope, a practical, fantastic show. Okay, here we go. I knew I was going to do a podcast episode here. I was really excited. And I thought long and hard about who I should have as a guest because, I know people in the thought leader business, people like Katie Milkman and others who have really influenced the world with their ideas. And I know people who lead big change projects in the world, big organizations. And I'm like, I could talk to them. But actually what I've found is like a perfect hybrid. Because Dan Pontefract, my guest, has a lot of experience in-house. He was the CLO for Telus in his kind of final major corporate role. That's a $50,000, $15 billion enterprise here in Canada, one of Canada's two big telcos. He was CLO at SAP before that. He shifted employee engagement from the 50s to the 90s and was so successful that actually set up the Telus Transformation Office, which is actually taking insights around culture change out to other organizations. Now, he's left Telus, but the tag that follows him is the culture whisperer, and he is used by corporations around the world to help them think through culture. And they're doing that not just because he's had this great experience as the CLO at Telus, but because he is a thought leader as well. He's written 5 books, and there's a 6th on the way that I happen to know about. He's written A Flat Army about strategy, The Purpose Effect about purpose, Work-Life Bloom about how to actually help people thrive in organizations. And his new book is actually about how do we manage all generations, particularly the older generation, as we think about culture and our organizations thriving. He's also a friend of mine. So he's a lovely man, an experienced man, and a wise man. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. So Dan, welcome.
Michael, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and to the crew here at ACMP. I thought maybe you'd just talk about me for 45 minutes. I won't have to do much, but we'll get into it. That's fine.
That would be funny. Let's start with the public face of change, and particularly managing up, because for the people who are coming in here, my guess is most of them are change leaders, ambitious change leaders. They're trying to make stuff happen, and they have to deal with a range of people above them to try and make that stuff happen. So where do we start with that? What do people get wrong?
Well, how long do we have, Michael? Well, I would say that ultimately, when you take a term like managing up, it's almost derogatory, right? It feels that way. And I'm kind of an antithetical culture whisperer, as you've named and coined me. And so the antithetical part there is managing up is actually a good thing. And I find that when you're going through a small change, a medium change, a larger change, it doesn't really matter the size. You got to find a couple champions. And I actually say a couple, at least 2. And those 2 champions or 2 plus are your opportunity to have not you, but somebody or somebodies, is that a word, else, to also act as faces, as conciliaries, as, I'm dating myself, but faces on the milk carton, right? Sort of these are the people we're looking for, and they're helping us with what we're trying to do. You have to go and nurture them. So the managing up part is twofold. You have to go find them. So that's the nurturing part. And then you've got to absolutely not just wax lyrical about them, but feed them everything that's possible so that whatever you're trying to do looks good, even if you are no longer there or you're on holiday for 6 months. So that's, to me, what managing up actually means through change.
Well, so first of all, a champion is different from a change sponsor.
Yeah. So a sponsor is usually, right, the executive that's got the budget or has said, yes, we'll do this. And so they act more as an arbiter, ultimately, of budget, typically. Maybe it's their unit. But champions can be from anywhere. And so let's
Right.
just say hypothetically. So let's say, you're rolling out some sort of new software product, and this is going enterprise-wide, just hypothetically. Well, that software product, whatever it may be, is probably somewhere under the purview of IT, the CIO's office, the CTO, right? So they're probably in charge of the budget and the timeline.
Yeah.
But if that particular product or service or software is one that's maybe more to do with finance, I'm not sure why, but let's go with it, right? Well, wouldn't it behoove you to maybe find not just a champion in finance, but maybe a champion in product or R&D or HR, where these champions are not necessarily married to where the budget sits, but they're all of a sudden now parade marshals, Michael. They're like, you got two of them at the front of the parade. Like, wow, look at how energized they are. I'm going to follow them wherever that parade goes.
Well, so help me figure out how I identify the people I am trying to woo as champions, because I suspect that what would happen if I was in that role is I'd just be going to the person I like or the person who I know, because I'm like, look, it's just easier. What are my criteria for a good champion?
One of the things you might be thinking about ultimately is another, I guess, culture whisperer adage that I might insert here, Michael, and that is, my network is my net worth. So whether your organization is 40 people or 40,000, your responsibility ultimately always as a professional, whether it's through change or just you being a leader of self and leader of others, is to build that network up. And it's probably no surprise to you, spoiler alert, that I believe every one of us is responsible for change.
Right.
So as much as we believe sometimes negatively or incorrectly that change is about the projects or the big major things that happen in an organization, we're all change agents. So I absolutely believe that your ear to the ground as a professional in any organization of any size is your responsibility to be that change agent.
So if I'm leading a change project or kind of responsible for it in some way, and I'm trying to find these two champions of which you speak, I might be looking up and I might be seeing a cast of 50 people who are more senior to me. How am I going to figure out which of those 50 I'm going to try and find my way to ask them to be the champions for this project?
So what are you doing inside the organization to be listening to what some of these executives and potential sponsors are doing? So following them on LinkedIn, following them in your inside networks, whether that's teams, find ways in which to join their town halls. Just get yourself inserted into their line of sight or line of digital sight. So again, let's say you're in HR, just hypothetically, and your job is to put in a new performance system. Don't you think that maybe if someone who's already anti-performance development or performance management is going to be a waste of your time towards looking at them as a potential champion or parade marshal? Not so good. So back to ear to the ground, what's on the company-wide town halls? Who's speaking? Who's in the company-wide emails or the things on Teams or the discussion boards? And you start to track who's using the vernacular, who's using past experiences in a way they're like, hang on a second, Dad. And you kind of take that and you scribble a little note to yourself. So you really have that ear to the ground responsibility. And how do you find ways in which to actually create a connection and make it relevant to them? I think that's one of the larger keys. Like just finding a name because they happen to be on USA Today, CNBC, or Globe and Mail. That's, if it doesn't really matter to them, then they're busy, right? So you've got to make it relevant. The what's in it for me, the WIFM, is going to be kind of key in your sleuthing.
I love that. And I can see that I'm trying to look for people who are influential, maybe a little bit against the change, maybe somewhat for the change, and trying to find two people who have that degree of influence and that tension between them, so that I'm not just replicating. I haven't got the same champion twice. I've got two different types of champions in this work. What else do I need to understand about the politics of those above and around me? Because I'll be blunt about this. I'm terrible at politics. I don't read the signs. I'm not good at nuance. I don't understand I can't even spell Machiavelli, yet alone understand what he's talking about. What have you learned about managing politics, and what would you coach me and the people listening in around that?
I think two key things. First would be time, and second of all, outcome / how do you make them feel, look good. So time. So whenever people embark on change, again, of any size, I tend to think that they don't think about the relationship bit, especially this managing up bit. You need some time before you start the change to find the two champions or more that are going to be your champions. And that is actually should be added into your work plan. And then people sort of get into it like, oh my God, we need champions. What? So I would say bake in some time into your cake of change so that you get those sponsors sorted out for you. So that's number one. Number two, though, is this is the Machiavellian piece, perhaps. The managing up part is how do you make them in the process through the change, and particularly right around go live, right? Whatever that is, how do they look good? And I think that's often also overlooked with the sponsors is that there's benevolence, but not often in organizations. So internal benevolence is not exactly pervasive or systemic. So you have to find ways in which to politic your way to sort of position to them, hey, guess what? Here's how I'm going to help you look good afterwards.
Dan, let's move to what you coined black ops, which I love as a term because it feels provocative and like it's a Netflix series, and that we should have squarer jaw and we should have bigger bulging muscles as we're talking about this. But what do you mean by black ops?
Don't you? I'm missing something here. What? Okay. So black ops inside the organization, i.e., AKA managing down.
Right.
Here's your opportunity as the change agent, the change lead, what have you, to effectively be in a mode whereby, you need spies in the camp, is another way to look at it, right? You're basically going around this organization saying, okay, where do I plant? Who can I plant? Who wants to be part of something like the movement of the change? And you get them involved in certain ways. So now you can incentivize. And I don't have anything wrong with spiffs or ways in which to sort of give people limelights. If you got budget, there's ways in which to give gift cards.
What's a spiff?
A spiff is an incentive way in which to say, if you help me out at the end of this, there's something that's going to come. It's used often in sales, right? So you got to go into sales mode as a change agent in your organization effectively and say, well, how do I drum up business, so to say, for the change? So again, I don't think people in a black ops change role should be against incentivizing people to be part of the change. That's totally fine. I don't think that's nefarious at all. I think that's the human condition. I think that's Cialdini territory.
Yeah, it is. How am I finding my internal spies?
First of all, there are some stars, and those stars are lit, and they may not be a leader, they may not have a leader title, but you just kind of, again, back to ear to the ground and my network's my net worth. You got to pay attention, not just to who's loud, because it's not about the proclivity to have volume or frequency. It's about that propensity to have depth. And you got to pay attention to the depth. You really have to be paying attention in the digital world and spend some time in different communities. Get yourself into a town hall that might not be your business unit if you have that stuff going on.
I love this idea. What sort of information am I looking for? What am I hoping people will report back to me?
So I guess one of the things is what's the context for your change? And you sort of are now looking for alignment and adjacencies, the two A's. So the alignment piece is who's directly kind of yammering, talking, playing nice in the sandbox of whatever your change may be. So again, if it's some sort of system and you see people talking about that system somewhere else, or an adjacent system or an aligned system, I should say, then you just sort of say, oh, look, there's Monica. Monica's chatting about this in a whole other discussion forum or whatever you want to call it, Teams, a Slack channel. Oh, interesting, right? But then the adjacent pieces are, well, it's pretty close. Maybe I'll just strike up a conversation or send a Slack or send a Teams message to that individual. Say, hey, I heard you, or I saw, or I read, or you did this, And you know what? I'm doing something over here. And I'm just wondering, so now you're connecting the dot. That's the alignment adjacent thing. That's the next action. You're now connecting, saying, putting them in the position of, it looks very much like you're into X. I'm doing Y. Do you want to maybe help me out so that there's some sort of Z here? And then you could be potentially, right, that champion, or in this case, Black Ops spy in the camp agent, to then help me or help the organization roll that out where you are. You could be my guy. You could be my gal. And then you're sort of now tapping into their worth. So when people feel they have worth at the organization, i.e. purpose and role, now we're cooking with kerosene.
What I'm hearing from you is part of your job as a leader and a change agent is to be looking around the edges for serendipity and for connections, because actually that's the way it's going to kind of be spreading out into the world. It's a reminder for me around that model. I can't even tell you where it comes from, around what you can control, what you can influence, and what you can neither control nor influence. And how, generally speaking, we massively overestimate what we can control. And that's a cause of a great deal of misery. But also we massively underestimate what we can influence. And that's a great cause of a loss of power and impact. And part of where I hear you taking us is to understand that actually, as a change leader, so much of what we're about is influence. And influence isn't just a lucky thing that you have or you don't have. It's something that you actually work and you create. You'll find more about Dan at his website, danpontefract.com. danpontefract.com. Now, Dan's written 5 great books. There's another one on the way as well. And honestly, I think they're all terrific. They're kind of like 6 different slices of all culture pie. And Dan's a terrific speaker. Should you be looking for someone to give a keynote on culture or purpose or thriving at work or more? Dan, we went to a wonderful Toronto restaurant called Julieta. And we somehow got into a conversation about how change doesn't stick. And you and I were talking about the fact that we both know Alan Mulally, the very famous CEO, previous CEO of Ford. But he got the Ford job because of the amazing things he did at Boeing and how he completely shifted that culture. And it was really a jewel of a corporate culture. And fast forward to now, and Boeing is a flaming dumpster of a corporate culture, as far as I can tell. Where do we go with this? I mean, what's your insight around the fact that change doesn't stick? And as people who are change leaders who are looking for legacy of some sort, what do we do with that?
It is a bit sad, not just about the Boeing reference and what Mulally did and what was eviscerated really post-departure, but it was a wonderful example in a negative way about how change doesn't stick. And so I think one of the realest things you have to recognize as a change agent is that change that you're a part of or in charge of is going to be for a particular time frame. You can't necessarily expect that to be cemented. This is not something in cement, in fact. You have to be a realist that this is for a period of time. And as much as, certain things that I've done, I'm still kind of angry about, Michael, that they are no longer there. They got, left, punted, kicked out.
The pendulum swung, and it was like, we need to stop this now.
Yeah. My bike rides are for that purpose. I just get it all out in the pedals, right? Like 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers later, I'm fine after that. But it's the pragmatism in me, perhaps, I would hope, is that, okay, Churchill, let's bring up, because no change podcast is good until you have Churchill. So one of Churchill's gazillion lines is a perfect one about change. He says, to improve is to change, but to be perfect is to change often. And what he's saying in that effectively is kind of like the Boeing story. It's like, okay, to improve is to change. What do we get out of that? That means it's a continuous improvement. To be a change agent is to recognize that we must always be constantly improving. To improve is to change, but to be perfect is to change often. What does that mean? It means perfection's impossible, because we're always in a constant state of continuous improvement. So toss perfection to the side and then say, all right, so if you're Boeing or you're Dan at an organization or otherwise, it's the change is for a period of time. and then get your ego out of the way, because it's either going to be taken to another level, so more good change, or it's going to drop in the case of Boeing, because maybe those champions, that stakeholder leader like a Malali with working together is not working together now. And I think that's, again, it's indicative and incumbent upon you as the professional to not be married to the final outcome of that change, because it's going to change anyway.
I mean, you say get your ego out the way, but some of us haven't yet reached enlightenment, and it's hard to shift my ego out of the way. So taking on board everything you're saying, how do I think about success if I'm a change leader, knowing that it's hard, it's elusive, it's ambiguous, and even if I succeed, the success isn't going to last forever. It's going to move on and mutate and turn into something else. How do you maintain an internal motivation, and how do you celebrate success?
Now I feel like we're either on a Brene Brown show or Oprah. I'm not. We'll figure that out later. I think ultimately that's got to come down to your definition of how you want to be known. And I have this, as you've heard probably 6,000 or 7,000 times, this declaration of purpose. And I didn't have it in the first part of my career. But then I established it in 2007, and I've been now gravitating to that declaration for, 18 years on bad math. And that purpose statement is, quote, "We're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through." But I didn't have that going into the switch between SAP and Telus for me, career-wise. I didn't have something where I was hanging my hat on. I was young, full of fluid intelligence, a river, perhaps, and not a rock at that point. And that sort of river fluid intelligence in me was like, everything's got to be perfect. Very anti-Churchillian. Everything must be perfect forever. My declaration of purpose was not one in which I felt that everything can be a constant change, and that I'm here to help people through whichever that scenario of change may be. So I had to drop perfectionism. I had to drop the thinking that I might be more important than the result, which I think in my early part of my career, I thought I was more important than the result. The result's what's important, and then recognizing that that'll probably change after anyway.
I love that. And in fact, the purpose of the Change Signal podcast is to help ambitious leaders, like the people who are here with us today, move towards modern change mastery. And I chose modern change mastery really deliberately because I think some of the dated tools that we have still linger in this space. But I'm really attracted to this idea of mastery, not because it's a completion, but because it's a constant refinement. There's constantly more to learn and get better at. So I think one of the deeper ways that we can measure success as change leaders is to seek modern change mastery. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Dan. We're going to open up the floor for questions. Heidi has kicked us off with a really great question, which is, how do you equip change champions? So earlier on in the conversation, you and I were like, how do we find them? How do we identify them? But okay, I found my 2 champions now. What do I tell them? What do I give them to give them the best chance of not just starting off being a champion, but sustaining that championness?
Yeah. Well, typically I would have kits. So you have a change kit. It depends where you are in the stage of the change, of course. So let's just say it's pre-adoption or pre-rollout or whatever the case may be. It's like, what's in that kit? That kit is things to be, yammering with your team about or others, things to be posting, things to be aware of, what we're in, how much it costs. Like there's all kinds of like talking points, right? So the pre, and then the during or just release-ish, and then post, like follow up and things to do. I think, again, like take a step back. When a PR firm, or whether it's internal or external organization, is announcing something that they've just done, what do you think the PR firm is doing? They've got executive talking notes, they've got media briefing notes, there's scripts, like whatever that is into the media, into the ethers of the public domain, there is a kit, a press kit, they're called. So why aren't you making a change kit? Always recommend a change kit.
I love that. There's a question from Amna. Now, she starts off by flattering you for a while, so I'm going to skip that.
obviously.
What are the most common pitfalls you have seen change practitioners fall into that throw sand in the change engine? That's a really big question. But if you're to pick one or two things to say, look, this is where in 2025, people who are change practitioners get tripped up, what do you notice?
Adoption.
What does that mean?
Well, so you go through the change. There's the pre, there's the during, and then there's the post. It's the post part that sometimes is more important than the pre or the implementation phase.
Right.
And so that's adoption. That's post-change adoption.
Right.
Like, do you really believe that that everyone will adopt whatever the change is just because? And so I think that's part of the thing, is that so many people spend so much time in the figuring out what's supposed to happen for the change to be successful. And then they have to go do the change. So that's the middle bit. Yeah. And then you've got the post bit, and everyone's on to the next shiny object or the next change thing. And they forget their black ops. They forget their champions, and other champions are not created because now you've gone on to the next thing. So you've got to make space in your calendar, in your change plans, etc., for post implementation, whatever that is, adoption, so that it becomes systemic and it's not lost. And that, to me, is you spending the time up front, whether it's budget, time, people, otherwise, other sponsors, other champions, other black ops, to ensure that that becomes systemic to the org or wherever the change may be.
I love the idea of a change kit. Something that needs to be given to those in the mix that will help them thrive and survive. And I'm not talking the info dump or the obligatory training or the corporate speak or any of the things that makes people's hearts sink a little, but a change kit that will help them get clear and get lit up and excited about what's ahead. I hope you're lit up and excited about the podcast. I am, you can probably tell. Thank you for all you do to spread the word. I'm particularly grateful if you post something on LinkedIn, sharing an episode or an insight that's resonated. And if you do, please tag me. I am trying to find more transformational leaders like you who are seeking modern change mastery. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.